Hi, it's Katrina. My friend David is going to be helping me out with the voiceover today, so I hope you enjoy.
Number 10. Polish Airlines Flight 5055. LOT Polish Airlines Flight 5055 was an ordinary passenger flight that left Warsaw, Poland on the morning of May 9, 1987. The Ilyushin Tu-62M Soviet long-range jetliner was supposed to land in New York, but instead the aircraft crashed into the Kabati Woods Nature Reserve less than 1 hour after departure. The accident was devastating, with 183 passengers and crew losing their lives. It was the deadliest accident involving an Ilyushin Tu-62, and it was also the deadliest airplane disaster in Poland's history. The crash occurred because the engine shaft disintegrated due to faulty bearings. There was a catastrophic failure of both left engines, then a fire started on board that burned away the control systems. The terrible tragedy of Flight 5055 can be heard in the black box recordings of the conversation between air traffic control and the pilots. Air traffic control insisted they quickly climb to 18,000 feet, 5,486 meters, but it didn't do much good. The crew soon realized there was something terribly wrong with the plane, and the black box recording revealed the panic inside the aircraft. There were some passengers screaming about fire, while others were shouting, "What's going on?" And finally, after some unintelligible noise, someone can be heard softly saying, "Good night, goodbye, bye, we're dying." Number 9. LAPA Flight 3142. In late August of 1999, LAPA Flight 3142 crashed after leaving the international airport in Buenos Aires, Argentina. The vehicle failed to get airborne because the pilots weren't paying attention and forgot to deploy the flaps. The devastating accident resulted in 3 crew members and 60 passengers dying, along with 2 people who were unfortunate enough to be on the ground at the time. It was the second deadliest aviation accident in Argentine history, right after Flight 2533 from 1997, in which 74 people died. The aircraft was 29 years old at the time of the accident. It was a Boeing 737-200 with an accumulated 64,500 hours of flight time. The plane had already taken off and landed 38,600 times. The captain of the flight was Gustavo R. Weigel, who was an extremely skilled pilot. First Officer Luis Echeverri was also a veteran pilot with over 4,000 logged flying hours. Before the flight even began, the pilot and the first officer got into a casual conversation with the flight dispatcher over the radio. They talked about the weather conditions and alternative airports to land at if there was a problem on the flight. However, things became a little too casual. Both pilots began talking about their personal relationships and mentioned that things weren't going so well with them in their home lives. Then, when they tried to take off, they crashed. The investigation following the incident concluded the crash happened because of a lack of crew discipline and an excessive amount of conversation not focused on the flight. In other words, the pilots were chatting too much and forgot to do their jobs. Their verbal exchange can be heard in the CVR recording, and it's chilling to think what came after such a casual conversation. Number 8. Malaysia Airlines Flight MH370. On March 8, 2014, Malaysia Airlines Flight MH370 vanished during a trip from Kuala Lumpur to Beijing. There were 239 passengers and crew on board, but none of them have ever been found. The unexplainable vanishing act has resulted in one of the most bizarre aviation mysteries of our time. Nobody knows how the plane disappeared or where it ended up. Investigators don't even have any leads, so it's no surprise that the disappearance of this flight has led to some insane conspiracy theories. One of the most recent theories that started circulating is that the black box recording from MH370 was discovered. When investigators listened to the recording on the box, they supposedly heard a creepy message that said, "Danger SOS. It is dire for you to evacuate. They are not humans. Danger SOS." The message seems to suggest the aircraft was besieged by extraterrestrials. However, there isn't any proof this happened, and it's all just speculation. That being said, if aliens did have something to do with the disappearance of Flight MH370, it would make sense why the airplane and its passengers have been so difficult to find. Number 7. United Airlines Flight 93. United Airlines Flight 93 was hijacked by members of Al-Qaeda on the morning of September 11, 2001, and there's no black box recording more haunting than the one from Flight 93. The final minutes of the horrifying ideal that those passengers on board suffered through was captured in the Mayday audio call. But first, let's look at the specifics of what happened. Flight 93 was part of the September 11th attacks on the World Trade Center, but it crashed in Somerset County, Pennsylvania. The passengers and crew mounted a brave counterattack against the hijackers in an attempt to regain control of the plane. Several people on board had already learned of the attacks in New York City and the Pentagon, and so they decided to fight for their lives. The hijackers stormed the cockpit just 46 minutes after they left the airport. The struggle between the hijackers and the pilot was transmitted directly to air traffic control. The hijackers were trying to crash the plane into the US Capitol building, but the struggle with the rest of the crew thwarted their plan. Instead, they crashed into a field by an old strip mine. And unfortunately, all 44 people on board were killed in the terrible incident. Number 6. Air France Flight 447. There was chaos in the cockpit when Air France Flight 447 crashed into the Atlantic Ocean on June 1, 2009. But we didn't know about the chaos for nearly 2 years after the flight disappeared. It was a lot like Malaysia Airlines Flight MH370 because it vanished over the Atlantic Ocean. It wasn't until 2011 that the wreckage was discovered, allowing investigators to find the flight data recorders and the plane's black box. The twisted metal remains of Flight 447 was found 2 miles, 3 kilometers beneath the ocean. Researchers soon began poring through the data to figure out what went wrong. They found that the plane suffered a technical problem when its airspeed sensors became covered in ice. Severe weather then led to a chain reaction of errors that forced the plane to hit the water, killing all 228 people on board. In July of 2011, the full transcript of the conversation happening in the cockpit was released. The recording shows that it wasn't just technical errors that caused the plane to crash, but ordinary human confusion. The pilots became confused when the speed sensors iced over, and you can hear the panic in their voices in the recording. After making a series of wrong decisions to try and correct the problem, they lost control of the plane. Without fully understanding what was happening, the aircraft then hit the water. What do you think really happened to Malaysia Airlines Flight MH370? Let us know in the comments below, and while you're at it, hit that subscribe button and let us know what other video topics you would like to see. Number 5. Continental Connection Flight 3407. In the audio recording from the cockpit of Continental Connection Flight 3407, there isn't anything particularly alarming, at least not at first. The black box recording from the doomed Buffalo flight reveals the captain and his first officer chatting casually as ice began to form on the windshield and wings. They made light, nonchalant conversation about the concern they shared for flying in such brutal winter conditions. Minutes later, pilot Marvin Renslow can be heard saying, "Jesus Christ," and then his co-pilot Rebecca Shaw screamed a scream so haunting that if you hear it, you'll never get it out of your head. A fraction of a second later, the aircraft plunged into a house and blew up in a ball of fire. All 49 people on board died, and a man on the ground was killed as well. This accident occurred on February 12, 2009. The investigation that was launched in response to the plane crash was done by the National Transportation Safety Board, and they found the probable cause to be pilot error. The pilots didn't respond the way they should have to stall warnings in the cockpit, so in the end, it wasn't the airplane's fault. The accident was caused by gross negligence on behalf of both pilots.
Okay, 2300 till established, clear for ILS 23 Cactus. 1452, and the ice is starting to come off the windscreen now.
Number 4. AirAsia 8501. AirAsia Flight 8501 was an international flight on its way from Indonesia to Singapore on December 28, 2014. While the plane was airborne, it ran into some difficulties. These issues resulted in the plane crashing violently into the Java Sea, killing all 162 people on board. But despite the huge number of casualties, it was only the third deadliest aviation disaster in Indonesia. About a year after the incident, the National Transportation Safety Committee released a report detailing the cause for the disaster. They said it was the plane's rudder control system that motivated the captain to do a full reset of the flight control computers. He couldn't have known, but this wasn't the correct decision. The rudder was malfunctioning and something definitely needed to be done, but resetting the controls wasn't the right thing to do. In the brief time that the controls were turned off, the airplane stalled and made an uncontrolled descent directly into the ocean. There was also some miscommunication between the two pilots, which was captured on the black box recording. The audio from the cockpit is extremely disturbing. For the last few moments of the flight, there are mostly alarm bells going off. At exactly 11:13 p.m., the chimes start. Then the warning chimes are joined by the sound of a stall warning at 11:16 p.m. You can hear someone saying, "Pull down" 4 times in a row at 11:17 p.m., and after more alarms sound, someone can be heard repeating, "Slowly, slowly." Then the recording suddenly ends. Number 3. American Airlines Flight 587. On November 12, 2001, American Airlines Flight 587 crashed into the residential neighborhood of Bell Harbor in Queens, New York City. It was a horrifying accident, especially since it came only 2 months after the devastating 9/11 terrorist attacks in September. The Airbus A300B4-605R shattered on impact and all 260 passengers were killed, along with 5 people on the ground. It became the second deadliest aviation catastrophe in American history after Flight 191 in 1979. In the minutes and hours after the flight, there was panic across the nation. Everyone knew a plane had crashed and there were fatalities, yet information was slow to come out. People thought another terrorist attack was imminent, and there was widespread panic. The National Transportation Safety Board released a statement saying the accident was caused by the first officer's aggressive overuse of the rudder controls. It had nothing at all to do with terrorism. The first officer was just hammering the control so hard that he stressed a vertical stabilizer, resulting in it separating completely from the aircraft. The intense forces also caused the 2 engines to separate and malfunction immediately before impact. The final words in the cockpit are unsettling to hear. There's a general panic when the pilots realize something awful is happening. You can hear them shouting out orders, and some loud thumps and bangs can be heard as well. Then there's the shrieking of alarms. Some of the pilots curse as another stall warning sounds, and then someone says, "Get out of it, get out of it." Those were, unfortunately, the pilot's last words as the plane smashed into the ground.
Get out of it! Get out of it!
Number 2. Airblue Flight 202. Airblue Flight 202 was on its way from Karachi to Islamabad, Pakistan on July 28, 2010, but before the plane ever reached the capital city, it crashed into the northern Margala Hills. In total, 146 passengers and crew were killed, with no one left alive. This is still the worst air accident that ever occurred in Pakistan. It was also the first time an Airbus A321 was involved in a fatal crash. The accident was caused by the captain's arrogance during the flight. His horrible attitude caused the first officer to lose self-esteem and not question the captain's mistake. Weather conditions forced the plane to make an unusual approach to the airport in the capital city of Islamabad. They were supposed to fly around the airport while keeping a short distance before lining up with the runway, but the pilot drove the aircraft straight into the side of a mountain before he could get the plane in the right position to make a landing. The arrogance of the pilot can be heard in the disturbing cockpit voice recording. Captain Chowdhury deviated significantly from the procedures he was supposed to follow for the approach. He did it his own way and it resulted in disaster. At one point in the recording, you can even hear the captain laughing at the orders given to him by air traffic control. When the first officer tried to say something about establishing visual contact with the airport, the captain basically told him to mind his own business. Seconds later, the captain flies the plane straight into a wall of rock.
Let's make sure that we land.
Yes, Captain.
Do you see the airport?
Negative, Captain.
Right there. Airport in sight.
Airport in sight. Airblue 202.
Number 1. National Airlines Flight 102. Just moments after taking off on April 29, 2013, National Airlines Flight 102 crashed. This was a cargo flight between Camp Bastion in Afghanistan and Dubai with only 7 people on board. But because of improperly secured cargo that broke free, those 7 people lost their lives. The cargo broke loose and rolled through the back of the cargo hold before smashing through the bulkhead. The rear flight control system was totally destabilized by this, which meant the aircraft was uncontrollable, and there was absolutely nothing the pilots could do to recover. It was all over before it even started. The cargo that came loose wasn't your average cargo. It was 5 heavily armored vehicles that were loaded onto the airplane when it stopped to refuel. Then, when the plane took off from Bagram at 3:30 p.m., its nose rose too sharply and the cargo became loose, resulting in damage. The aircraft then exploded in a fireball before even getting off the runway. The vessel exploded at the end of the airfield, killing 4 pilots, 2 mechanics, and a loadmaster. The terrifying crash was caught on video by a dashcam on someone's car who happened to be driving by at the exact time of the accident. It's pretty horrifying to watch, especially when paired with the final audio from the cockpit. In the hour before the accident, the crew were discussing their concern over the heavy load. It's extremely obvious in the audio that they were uneasy about the restraints used on the vehicles. The first officer even told the captain one of the straps was busted, suggesting the load could break free at any time. The captain then says that's scary when talking to the loadmaster about how much the vehicles were moving in their restraints. Even though they were acutely aware of the possible danger they were in, nothing was done about it. So when the airplane took off, it crashed just seconds later. Thanks for watching. Be sure to subscribe and remember, let us know what other topics you'd like us to cover in the comments. See you next time.